Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 209. We're going to discuss Game of Werewolves, also known as Lobos de Arga or Attack of the Werewolves, released in 2011. I had to buy this on Blu-ray, rip it to a thumb drive, and track down a bootleg English subtitle track before I could watch this. I obviously had not seen this before. As always, we start with the prominent crew and cast. You can find links to a more complete credit list in the show notes. As is typical for these foreign language films, I apologize for any mispronunciations of names and titles and acknowledge my challenges in doing research in a language that I don't speak. This film was written and directed by Juan Martinez Moreno. Juan Martinez Moreno worked for 10 years as an assistant director before becoming a screenwriter and director. Game of Werewolves is his last feature-length project, although he contributed to ABC's of Death too. I could find no firm information on who was in charge of the werewolf special effects. Wish I could, because they deserve credit for it. The cast includes Gorka Oxoa as Tomas Marino, Carlos Aracis as Calixto, Second de la Rosa as Mario, Mabel Rivera as Abuela Rosa, Manuel Manquina as Evaristo, Luis Zahira as Sargento Guardia Civil, and Marcos Ruiz as Diego. Gorka Oxioa is widely recognized for his work in Spanish television and comedy. He has starred in hit series like Velvet, Hospital Valley Norte, Aguila Roja, and Alpha Males. Carlos Aracis is an actor, singer, and comics artist. He rose to prominence with the cult TV sketch series Machuchada Nui and has delivered standout performances in films like the dark drama The Last Circus, aka Balada Triste de Pera, and the horror comedy Witching and Bitching. Secund de la Rosa is an actor, writer, and theater director with a strong comedic presence. He is best known for long-running TV roles in Aida and appearances in films like The Bar, Witching and Bitching, La Mula, The Other Side of the Bed, and Holy Camp. Mabel Rivera won the Goya for Best Supporting Actress for The Sea Inside, aka Mar Adentro, and delivered memorable performances in Guillermo del Toro's The Orphanage, aka El Orfanato, and Goya's Ghosts. Manuel Maquina's breakout role was in the 1997 comedy hit Airbag and has appeared in numerous Spanish films and TV shows. Prominent projects include El Caballero Don Quixote, Ojom y Ocan, and Era Visto. Luis Zahara won 2 Goya Awards for Best Supporting Actor in The Candidate and The Beast, aka Asbestos. He has shown in major films like Cell 211 and May God Save Us, and television like Wrong Side of the Tracks. Marcos Ruiz is a rising young Spanish actor. He started early with roles in family adventures like Zip and Zap and The Marble Gang, and has built an impressive resume with dramatic turns in The Laws of the Border, Unbridled, Smoke and Mirrors, and many TV series. Let's go over the plot summary and my initial impressions. A prologue gives us the backstory. 100 years ago, a noblewoman married to an old, impotent lord forced herself on a gypsy knife thrower and got pregnant. To prevent anyone from discovering who the child's real father is, she had the entire gypsy camp murdered, which seems like overkill. The man's wife cursed the noblewoman with her dying breath. When the noblewoman's son Diego turns 10, he becomes a werewolf. In modern days, Tomas, a struggling novelist, returns to his ancestral village of Arga in the Galician region after 15 years away, thinking that he's there to receive some kind of literary award or hometown hero tribute, that kind of thing. Instead, the villagers have a darker reason for luring him back. They aim to break the werewolf curse tied to his family's bloodline. If the wolf tastes the blood of a descendant of the Marino family, like, say, Tomas, 100 years to the day after the curse was made, then the curse will end. He's abducted and dumped into these old tunnels along with his useless agent, where they awaken the werewolf. His childhood best friend rescues him and accidentally lets the werewolf free. The beast wastes no time in killing 4 villagers. The next day, Tomas and his friends find the cursed boy Diego, who has not aged a day since he was affected, and they take pity on him. The villagers come up with a very bad plan to hunt the werewolf at night. Tomas loses both of his pinkies in a very funny sequence in which they try to fulfill the curse's conditions without anyone actually dying. It's all for naught, however, since the villagers don't want any living witnesses who know that they have been feeding Camino pilgrims to the wolf for decades now. But before they can kill Tomas and his friends, the full moon rises, and the curse for failing to break the curse kicks in. Yep, the boy is cured, but the rest of the villagers transform into werewolves. Luckily, Tomas's grandmother shows up in the nick of time and rescues them from the horde of werewolves. Two cops show up, one of whom immediately runs away. The other one, however, turns out to be a badass who shoots a bunch of werewolves only to turn his pistol on himself rather than be overwhelmed by numbers and eaten. He's not actually dead and shows up later to help out. Tomas and crew hold up in an old church, trying to hold off the attackers. Grandma dies. Injuries are sustained. Tomas ends up using some old dynamite left over from the Spanish Civil War to blow up the church and kill all the werewolves, barely sneaking out of the old tunnels in time. Diego immediately ages to his proper age, dying of old age in seconds. The epilogue shows Tomas tying up his friends in case their injuries turn them into werewolves, only for him to transform. The end. My initial impressions are that this is a charming, low-budget gem that doesn't take itself too seriously, but still delivers some pretty satisfying creature moments. The pacing occasionally feels a bit uneven, and the comedy might not land for everyone, but the heart and practical effects make it a fun ride for lycanthrope enthusiasts. The cast has strong chemistry, and the village setting is atmospheric. What starts out as a quirky homecoming comedy turns into a chaotic mix of horror and laughs as the full moon brings out the beasts in, well, almost everyone. The film balances broad Spanish humor, buddy dynamics, and genuinely tense werewolf attacks. My main takeaway on the special effects: for a low-budget indie, the werewolf looks are surprisingly effective, thanks to practical suits and makeup evoking old-school creature features. We get tall, imposing, razor-fanged, red-eyed beasts that feel properly monstrous rather than watered down, which is a nice counterweight to the comedy in the film. There are no real on-screen transformations. Those mostly happen off-screen. Attack scenes use a mix of practical makeup and stunt work with some clever editing. There's no big CGI overkill here, which is a huge win for werewolf fans. The rampages and chases deliver solid practical gore and movement that holds up well. It won't blow you away or anything, but it's committed and it's fun, with designs that emphasize the feral, folkloric side of the legend. Now, this is a comedy, and the comedy is way more important to the film than the lore is. The film does draw on most of the traditional elements like the full moon trigger and a family blood curse, but it puts a fresh comedic Spanish spin on them. This is a supernatural curse. The village of Arga has been plagued for generations, and only the involvement of a specific Merino descendant can end it. There is implied bite transmission as well, and pack-like dynamics with the villagers' secrets and denial, both before and after the secondary curse kicks in. There is no mention of silver that I could think of, so I can't remember anything. It's funny how we romanticize going home, right? That warm, nostalgic pull of childhood streets, old friends, and family traditions. But in Game of Werewolves, Tomas Marino's return to the remote Galician village of Arga after 15 years shows just how dangerous that pull can be, especially when literal monsters are waiting for you. Tomas is a struggling novelist living in the big city. He comes back home to receive an award and find inspiration in his abandoned family mansion. What he doesn't know is that he's the last male descendant of the cursed Marino family. A century before, in 1910, a vengeful gypsy curse turned the Marquis's son into a bloodthirsty werewolf. That curse has haunted the village ever since. The film uses Tomas's homecoming as a metaphor for confronting that family legacy. His bloodline carries a literal curse he can't escape. Returning to the decaying mansion and reconnecting with childhood friend Callisto forces him to face not only the supernatural horror, but also his own stalled life and forgotten roots. One of the film's strongest elements is how the entire village of Arga is in on the secret. They've known about this curse for generations and maintained a careful facade of normalcy, even sacrificing the occasional lone pilgrim to keep the beast satiated, right up until they lure Tomas back as the sacrificial lamb to finally break it. Now, this speaks volumes about collective responsibility in the face of horror. The villagers, they aren't evil caricatures. They're just desperate people who've lived with terror for 100 years. They've protected their homes from outsiders while keeping the truth buried, turning their collective trauma into a twisted community ritual. When things go wrong, and they go gloriously wrong, it explodes into comedy horror gold, as denial gives way to panic and werewolf pandemonium. In broader Spanish werewolf lore, this fits perfectly with Galician traditions of isolated communities, hidden curses, and the lobos homme, those tragic, often familial werewolves tied to blood and place. Game of Werewolves modernizes it with humor, but the underlying dread of communal secrets rings true. How long can a town suppress its monsters before everyone becomes a monster? The film balances this with buddy comedy energy. Tomas teaming up with Callisto and others as the secondary curse turns the whole village into werewolves. It's hilarious, gruesome, and surprisingly poignant about shared responsibility. No one escapes the legacy when the pack turns on itself. Game of Werewolf stands out in Spanish cinema for mixing Nashi-style passion with modern horror comedy. The practical effects pay loving homage to classics, while the themes grounded in real emotional territory, even while it is still funny. Despite what Hallmark movies tell you, homecoming isn't always healing. It can awaken the beast. And community secrets show how denial only delays the inevitable howl. It's been a little while, so let's move on and discuss the rich history of Spanish werewolves. While the focus stays on cinema, we will roam through the folklore, real history, and some other arts that shape these Iberian beasts. Spain has given us some of the most passionate, tragic, and downright savage werewolf tales out there. Spanish werewolf lore draws heavily from the rugged landscapes of Galicia in the northwest, misty forests, Celtic influences, and a deep sense of the cursed and the wild. The classic figure is the lobisome, or the lobison, often the seventh son of the seventh son, or just the seventh child sometimes. If it's a girl, she might become a witch. If it's a boy, a werewolf doomed to roam under the full moon. These aren't always rampaging monsters. Some legends portray them as tragic outcasts, cursed to hunt or even eat corpses, blending fear with pity. A standout real-world case ties directly into the lore. Manuel Blanco Romasanta, Spain's first documented serial killer in the mid-19th century, around the 1850s in Galicia. He confessed to at least 13 murders, but claimed he was a lobisome, transformed into a wolf by a curse and compelled to kill. He said he used the victim's fat to make soap. The courts debated his lycanthropy defense. A doctor examined him, but he was ultimately convicted. This case blurred the line between folklore and crime, feeding into broader European werewolf panics while giving Spain its own infamous werewolf of Alriz. These stories echo older European roots like Greek lycoa or medieval trials, but carry a distinctly Iberian flavor. Catholic guilt mixed with pagan wilderness, internal struggle and isolation in rural communities. Wolves were real threats in the countryside, so the legends served as warnings, explanations for violence, and explorations of humanity's bestial side. In literature and art, the werewolf appears in Galician oral traditions, regional legends, and later works blending horror with cultural identity. While they're not quite as dominant as in French or German tales, it influenced Iberian storytelling. Visual arts and theater occasionally drew on these motifs, but cinema became the real canvas for bringing them to life. Spanish horror cinema exploded in the 60s and 70s under Franco's regime, often using genre as a veiled commentary or just escapist thrills. Werewolves fit perfectly, beastly transformations mirroring repressed desires or societal beasts. One early English standout is The Curse of the Werewolf in 1961 from Hammer Films. It draws on Spanish folklore vibes. A cursed child born of rape grows into a tragic lycanthrope. Practical effects and Oliver Reed's tormented performance make it a classic. Then enters the king. Paul Nashi, aka Jacinto Molina, the Spanish Lon Chaney, is easily the most prolific werewolf actor in history. Starting with La Marca del Hombre Lobo, aka Frankenstein's Bloody Terror. That's not a direct translation. In 1968, Nashi created Count Waldemar Daniński, a Polish noble cursed with lycanthropy. He played the role across a dozen or so films, not a strict continuity, but a recurring tragic hero who showed up in multiple stories. I've got a whole playlist dedicated to Nashi's lycanthropic filmography if you want to learn more about him. Nashi's Daniński is passionate, muscular, and often sympathetic, fighting his curse while battling other monsters. The films are gory, atmospheric, Euro horror gems with practical makeup, fur, fangs, and transformations, low budgets, and wild plots. They put Spanish werewolf cinema on the map, influencing international fans. Nashi wrote many of the films and became a genre icon despite censorship hurdles. Other Spanish films directly adapted the Roma Santa tale with entries including The Unseen Woods and Roma Santa, the Werewolf Hunt. They're both more grounded, atmospheric takes on the real 19th century killer, blending historical drama, horror, and courtroom tensions. Great practical effects and a focus on the human, or maybe beastly, monster within. More modern ones like Game of Werewolves mix comedy and horror, village curses, hapless heroes, and a fun spin on the tradition. This isn't the last Spanish werewolf either. We'll get to more, keeping the subgenre alive. Spanish cinema often emphasizes tragedy, romance, and cultural isolation over pure American-style rampages. Think tormented anti-heroes and folklore roots. My recommendation, if you're new, start with Nashi's Mark of the Wolfman or Werewolf versus the Vampire Woman for pure fun. Then Roma Santa for grounded chills and Curse of the Werewolf for classic tragedy. These are essential for any full moon film buff craving variety beyond what Hollywood gives us. For die-hard lycanthrope fans, Game of Werewolves is an easy recommendation if you enjoy horror comedy blends with practical effects and international flavor. It's not a masterpiece, but its charming cast, committed creature work, and fun twists make it worth a watch, especially on a full moon night with friends. However, it's really hard to track down, so be forewarned. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed instead. Next, I plan to discuss Neo Wolf from 2010. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back here next episode.